All right, I think we are live. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're based. Very, very happy to organize this webinar today. We have a very, very exciting panel. It's a topic we wanted to cover for quite a long time, and we finally made it happen. We're going to introduce our speakers in a minute. I just wanted to say hi, I'm Lucien. I'll be the host. I'll be facilitating this session. We have about an hour and a half together. We have obviously tons of questions for you, and we'll be also taking questions from the audience. So the topic today is no code and open source, right? So at Allegria, we talk a lot, obviously, about no code. This is what we focus on at large. And we've seen this growing trend on our side from an agency's perspective on the open source movement within the no code movement. And we wanted to gather in a room, so to speak, the actors of the front end, the automation side, and the database backend side together, put you in a room and ask you tons of questions to see like, where's this headed? What's your master plan? You collaborate together and all this. So without further ado, let me change this. All right. Let me introduce the speakers we have today in the room. So maybe I'll leave it over to each of you to introduce yourselves. And we will start with we start with automation. We start with Viraj. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what your company does?
Sure, thanks, Lucien. Hey, I'm Viraj, everyone. I work at NA10, and for those who are new to NA10, it's a low-code automation platform, which means you can very easily connect lots of different services, anything with an API. Basically, you can connect with NA10, do things with that data that you're pulling in, combine it, transform it, apply some logic, either using our visual drag and drop builder, or if you're a dev, you can write JavaScript directly inside as well. And of course, you can then send that modified data anywhere else, quite easily, using JSON, which is what NA10 uses. I work on the product team at NA10, and also I'm responsible for our go-to-market strategy as well.
All right, thanks. And you're based in Berlin with the rest of the team, or?
So NA10 is Berlin headquartered, although I'm based in London myself.
In London yourself. All right, cool. And thanks very much, Viraj. And next we have, I don't know who you want to zoom in. I think Arpit, we're going to continue with Arpit maybe.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Lucien, for having me on board today. I am the CTO and co-founder of AppSmith, which is an open source low-code application builder. So you can drag and drop UI elements using AppSmith onto the screen, arrange them however you want visually, and connect it to an API or database that you host privately and just deploy a web app. It's a great tool if you do not like mucking around with HTML, CSS. If those things, those tools give you ulcers, then maybe AppSmith's the tool that you've been looking for. And personally, so I'm a builder at heart. I'm a veteran startup founder. I've about 10 years of experience, building various products and various startups, ranging from AI, fintech, logistics, telecom, video gaming. So I've seen a very large array of industries and products. And the reason that we also did AppSmith was because in each of these companies, because I was the co-founder, I was the CTO, I would end up having to build these admin panels, and it sucked. And now that's why we decided to do an entire product to make lives easier.
Got it. I think, yeah, we'll go more obviously into details about all this, but yeah, thanks for the introduction, Arpit. And finally, we have Robert from Baserow. Over to you, Robert.
Yeah, so hi everyone, and thanks again, Lucien and Allegria for the invitation. So I'm Robert, territory manager at Baserow. Previously, I worked on the launch of several SaaS solutions for a large company. And lately, I've been working on tools that solve the challenges of centralization, collaboration, and data acculturation. So what I have noticed is this in one of the great advanced of the last decade is that companies are increasingly seeking to be data-driven and to take back the governance of their data. So in theory, it's nice, but the challenge is quite substantial. On the one hand, because it's necessary to create acculturation in this project, specifically for business team. What is data? How do I collect it? And how do I exploit it? And on the other hand, the challenge is consequent because once a business team start to exploit this data, the question is, how do I ensure that they do it in a compliant way? So with this in mind, I became interested in open source solution for the compliance side and for the flexibility, but also in no code, which give a lot of new perspective for business team. And when I came across Baserow, I say to myself that I should jump on the bandwagon because there is a real momentum, I think, for no code and open source tool in this context. So I will start by presenting Baserow in a very factual way, and we will have the opportunity today to talk more about the vision and the value proposition. So in 3 words, Baserow is a relational database to store and centralize data. So this is the data aspect. It's a no-code tool to allow non-technical teams to collaborate and share around this data. That's the data-driven aspect. And finally, it's an open source solution, so you can host it on SaaS or on-premise to be compliant and allow the flexibility of the tool to address your specific need.
Got it. Thanks everyone. So just to recap, so we have I'll just shuffle the order a bit to be a bit more logical, but we have AppSmith for building the internal apps. We have N8N, I think you said 9. Do we said 9 or just N8N, right? N8N to automate, orchestrate everything on the background, and you have Baserow to host your data, and with that, we can basically build everything. Obviously, it's much more complex than that. All these solutions interact with the rest of the web, but this is basically the basis for building anything you want, both no code, so yourself, and in an open source manner. So I think what everybody is interested about today is to dive right into this open source philosophy. I think no code, we are getting obviously we're familiar with the 2 notions, right? But with no code being like an empowerment angle to building software, enable within companies the citizen developer, so they called, to build their business applications themselves, right? And we come with this open source philosophy. So I guess these opening questions for you, all of you now, regardless of specifically what each of your companies are doing, is was basically open source the strategy from the get-go? Did you start as an open source company? And why did you choose to go open source at the beginning or at some point? What was the rationale behind that? If we can, I don't know who wants to start here.
Maybe I'm happy to.
Yeah, go ahead.
To start this.
Yeah.
Okay. So AppSmith, the first about 6-7 months or maybe 8 months of our product journey was as a closed source product. So we were very much heads down, 5 or 6 folks sitting around a table just building a SaaS product. And the reason for initially doing this in a closed source fashion was because we did not have anything worthwhile to release to users, to our community, and because, as I think Robert and Viraj will also attest, that it takes a lot of effort to build something that is no code, because there is some code somewhere somebody has written. So it takes a lot of effort. So we were building it very much behind closed doors. But the more conversations that we ended up having with our users, and in AppSmith's case, it is very much developer focused. So we focus very heavily on developers and product managers who have a basic sense of JavaScript, SQL, or so it's not that you need to be the best developer in the world, but you need to have some sort of idea about programming. So that was our target market for AppSmith. And the more that we talked to this user segment, the overarching philosophy that came back to us is all things being equal, developers or users would pick an open source platform. So if we assume that all the quality and the features, etc., are available in a closed source SaaS hosted platform versus an open source platform, they would pick open source. And that, I think, changed our entire trajectory, because a bell went off in our heads which said, why should we be a closed source platform when all our users are clamoring for and looking out for an open source alternative? And that's why we went open source. And as a philosophy and as a I would say product move, I think this was one of the best things that we ended up doing, because the amount of love and feedback that we've gotten from the community has been instrumental in helping AppSmith as a product grow leaps and bounds that would have been much harder for us to do had we continued our journey as a closed source product.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting. I have a follow-up questions on that point, but I'll hold it for now. I don't know if Viraj and Robert, you want to react or like add on top of this.
Sure. I guess not to kind of create too many surprises. N8N is actually not technically open source. It's fair code. And I guess to give some background, maybe it's interesting to sort of explore how N8N came into being. So the current CEO and founder Jan, I guess built N8N as a side project. He found that when he was automating things, I think Arpit touched on a similar thing. You end up doing like a lot of the same tasks, and they take a lot of time every single time. And N8N was really the product that made a lot of those, kind of packaged up a lot of those repetitive processes. Things like authentication, things like connecting to sort of monitoring different API changes and so on. And really, that's how N8N came into being, and sort of started on GitHub as a project there, and it's kind of snowballed from from there. I guess the reason it's fair code. Let me just cover what fair code is. So these
maybe the nuance is interesting for the audience here. Yeah,
for sure. And again, similar to open source, with a fair code product like N8N, the source code, all the source code is available. So you can it's on GitHub. You can run it yourself. That's all totally fine. It's it's okay to use it for free for yourself, for your business. That's all fine. And I think where the fair code philosophy comes in is if you wanted to commercialize N8N for yourself. So for example, if you wanted to offer N8N hosting, or if you wanted to perhaps integrate N8N into your own product, so embed it, that's when there would be a license required. And it really aims to kind of give the best of both worlds, where the development team are kind of compensated for any sort of like anyone getting a huge amount of value out of the product. Because it's the source code is available, that barrier to just kind of downloading it and trying it out is still very low. There's no sort of lengthy sales motion. There's none of the kind of classic things you might expect with SaaS or or products that are closed source. So we really try and bridge the best of both worlds there with fair code.
Understood. So just to sum up the nuance here, so because I think N8N is quite often assimilated as a no-code source, an open source tool as the others here in the room. So just to really clarify the nuance here is like people are not contributing or cannot contribute to your code, or that's the main difference, or
not at all. So actually, in that sense, it's like an open source product. So users can contribute. But I think given that N8N has a lot of connectors, we're trying to connect to a lot of different products. That is a really key part, is that anybody can write a node for it. They can modify the code that they're running themselves. The key difference, I guess, or the key kind of where it starts to diverge from sort of open source in its sort of truest essence, is if you're kind of integrating N8N into an existing commercial product, or if you wanted to white label N8N, if you wanted to offer hosting, so any of these sort of super high value activities leveraging N8N, those require a license. But usage
got it.
Your business or extend it, that's all completely fine to do under the current under the.
Whereas open source is really like no limits. Like you take it, you do it, you do what you want with it, and you can use it in your own product.
Absolutely, and I guess
got it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess the follow-up question could be like, how do you control that? And so on. It's all based on, I guess, on assuming people will be like making a fair usage, as the name suggests. Got it. Robert, anything on this? Like, did the company start as open source as well?
Yeah, so Arpit and Viraj told almost the main benefits of open source and why, in general, a company should be interested in creating an open source company. So I'm gonna more tell you like an anecdote on Bram, the founder of
Yeah.
Baserow. So he started working on Baserow as a side project with a full-time job, which became a part-time job later. Then he left his company where he worked to do some freelance so that he has more time to devote to Baserow. And finally, he stopped everything and focused 100% on Baserow. So the reason for the why will seem obvious, but because generally people start a business because they have a good idea. But for Bram, it was the open source community that pushed him to stop everything. So Bram went from a side project to a company with 15 people spread over Europe. Now we are VC founded with 5 million euro from a VC in the Netherlands, another one from the UK. And over the last 2 years, we have gained steady traction in the open source community with user building backend database for mobile application, running AI ML models on top of the Nocode database, or organizing marketing campaign with many stakeholders. So Baserow also sees interest for the public sector user where open source cloud application are a strategic priority. Today, we have more than 25,000 signups. We are happy to see our base continue to grow monthly. And those same, what I wanted to tell you is that those same users were asking initially for an open source alternative to Airtable. So for those who don't know Airtable, it's our main competitor. They are valued around 11 billion, something like that. But it's a SaaS platform. And for a lot of users, a lot of companies, a lot of institutions, it's a deal breaker. So obviously, from the beginning, the open source aspect drove this project and continue to drive it. And it's one of the main reasons why Bram were pushed in a way to develop Baserow.
Got it. So what I hear from you three is really like the community power you get from being open source or fair code, which essentially would be very close for the users. Is such an asset that made you choose this direction. A question that we didn't prepare in advance, so I'll ask it like this, and I think the audience can also drop questions in the chat, and we'll try to take them from time to time or towards the end. My question on this is like, we talk about the benefits here, but what were the downsides of being open source? I guess you have to tweak your business model a bit because obviously you can't just charge in the same way as SaaS, a regular, I would say, private SaaS solution would charge. So what were the trade-off you had to do when you said, okay, this is like, we're going to have a huge community if we go like the open source way, this is worth it, but we have to make this and this trade-off. They are worth it, obviously, because you're here today, but what were they? And what did you adapt to go with this strategy? Maybe Robert, you can start. Oh, sorry. But maybe
please, Robert, go ahead.
Can start on this one. But this is maybe a more difficult one because it's a bit like just popping in my head like right now. And I think that we are on your Arpit, so you can if you had an idea. Yeah.
Okay, so from our end, the trade-offs were, I mean, there were like long conversations between the entire team about going open source, because the obvious drawback to being open source is, as you said, the potential to generate revenue becomes a little harder. And we are essentially pushing revenue down by a few years, because the first few years we're building the community, we're building the product, and then we kind of focus on revenue post that. So it's not that we would generate revenue on day one, but we are pushing revenue off by a few years. So that was the first sort of big trade-off that every open source company or product ends up making. The other not so well-known fact that we probably did not realize it back then, but we kind of realized it through our journey, was that open source projects or open source products have to end up finding product market fit twice. It's hard enough trying to find product market fit once in your lifetime, but because you need to find that PMF for your community edition so that the community adopts it, finds it useful enough. And then, whenever you launch a business or enterprise or commercial edition to generate revenue, you have to find that PMF all over again, because any features that you are offering for a commercial edition, now does that make sense? What is the price point? So on and so forth. And if we were a very traditional SaaS business, we would have done this once in our lifetime. So these are the two, I think, big sort of trade-offs.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's probably the same for Baserow, right? I think the situation is different for N10, but for Baserow it's probably the same rationale, right? And the same kind of two market fits to find.
Exactly. And the thing is, when you are open source, you have a lot of attraction. And when you are a freemium, when you have a freemium version, you have a lot of requests from users. So you have to prioritize and understand in what direction you want to go. And this is difficult because you have to keep a good roadmap and to go to keep your vision in mind. And it's more difficult to handle it with a lot of freemium users that are using your platforms than when you have some companies and they are going to pay. So you have to identify what your freemium user needs and what companies gonna pay for. So yeah, totally agree with Arpit.
And Viraj, I think for you it's a bit different. That it's like with what you explained about Fair Code, in a sense, like it's the same product, right? But it's like depending on the usage, you either end up paying or not. So that was more like in that sense, you have only, well, it's still several market fits to find, but in the sense like it's with the same kind of product, you are like, it's just like how we use it that dictates whether we generate revenue for you or not.
Right, but I think in 90% of use cases, maybe 95, the points Arpit and Robert raised are very much applied to us as well. I think maybe one observation I'd add to that is it's often hard to know who's using you. I've been surprised at
True.
where every week we come across a sizable team in kind of a relatively well-known company, and they just post on the forum for the first time. And we're like, "What? You guys were using N10?" And they're like, "Yeah, we've been using it for months and months." And because you haven't got with a closed source product, you'd know exactly the email addresses of all the users. You'd know what plan they're on, how many seats they have. It's not always easy to get this information when your product is source code available or open source.
Got it. All right, interesting. But that's I think enough about this. I think questions that are maybe more towards at you as creators of these solutions. So we're gonna like transition into like the other perspective, and obviously like what are people why are people coming to you? It can be you either as an open source solution or you specifically for your set of features. I think that kind of relates to one question. I'm gonna show it here from the audience here from Jason, who is asking like basically where would people go to your solutions compared to like one established tool in the market, which is OutSystem. So
yeah,
just to sum up basically, so why are companies coming to you? Is it for open source specifically, or is it for the rest of your features? Can you because the nature of the solution being able to being like fully hosted and so on, you might not know all the time. That's an interesting fact. But otherwise, I'm sure you have like your insights on this.
I think this question is related to your topic, this question of Jason. The first thing is that OutSystem requires much more technical knowledge. Baserow, and it's the same for AppSmith and N10 almost. It's much easier to use within a broad non-technical audience. So, and it's gonna tell me if you want me to answer directly this topic, but it's related to not just only open source, but to the connection between no code and open source that is gonna give the powerfulness of this kind of tool.
Got it. Yeah. Any other insights from your customers that you saw that
Yeah, I'll jump in for this actually. I think one of the kind of recurring themes speaking to especially the more technical users of N8N is being open source or source code available is a huge relief. And what I mean by that is with a closed source product, you can sort of build, especially with a low code or no code product, you can build to a certain extent. And if you hit a roadblock, that's it. You're kind of everything you've built at that point could be useless. With a product which you can, extend yourself and which you can, jump right into the code, a lot of people are like, you know what, even though I may not do that ever, just knowing that I can do that if I get stuck is a huge relief, because I feel like I can build on whatever I'm doing. If our business needs change, and your product isn't quite there yet, I'll just tweak it myself to do whatever I need it to do. And I think that, Jason, is a big reason a lot of users come to N8N, and I'm sure would apply to AppSmith and Baserow as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would echo 100% what Viraj said, because because adopting a platform like AppSmith, N8N, Baserow, there is always a fear of hitting a glass ceiling. And there are these use cases that you can think of right now today, which are addressed by each of these products, each of these solutions. But there is always a fear that what if tomorrow my CEO comes in and asks me to do X, and this product does not have that feature. So that comfort of being able to extend fork and then extend an open source project, that is definitely a big sort of relief. The other I would say is I would add to this is the lack of, I mean, this leads to lack of vendor lock-in. So there is the fear, there's also that fear, like, what happens if, AppSmith runs out of money? What if, as maintainers, we just decide to part ways with the project? What's going to happen to all the other apps that you've built over the past few years on this platform? So being open source also gives that level of comfort that, we can still host it. We have the source code. We may or may not be able to extend it very well, or etc. But we can decide our own migration path of the platform and not be beholden to a closed source company that's just announcing that, hey, we have 3 months of runway and we're shutting down. So you can define your own migration path of the platform. So that's, I think, the other big reason to choose, or why users end up choosing an open source low code or no code solution as compared to OutSystems, Mendix, etc. Which, by the way, are fantastic products. They've been there in the industry for 15, 20 odd years. There's a reason that they still exist. But I think the world is changing a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Got it. So you're removing a lot of the fear and also pressure on yourself, I guess, in this way, by basically saying, yeah, if we go under, you'll still have our product. If you hit a technical limitation that we can't do, you can go to a developer and they extend the platform. So, question about this specifically, how, and maybe the answer is not absolute, and also maybe different for each of you, but if with my team we kind of make a fork and deviate from the original product, how are we still able to benefit from the further evolutions that you make to your product, or is it is the answer absolute, it's a no? Is the answer is it depends what you modify, or is it something else? Is it maybe, I don't know, Viraj, you want to jump in? I think you are.
Sure. So, I think short answer is absolutely you can benefit, because that code, or the updates, is still being published, to a repository. You can still see and use that code.
Oh, in that way, yeah, I see.
Maybe the only complexity is if you modify a lot of the code, then you've got to check, okay, will this change break anything? So the more you change, I guess, the more there is to kind of think about. But if you're making just a very small change, and chances are all the new updates will kind of fit right in, then probably it's quite straightforward to maintain your forked version with the latest updates.
Got it. Yeah.
Just extending to what Viraj said, I think it is also how you added on to the base platform. So what sort of architectural or software principle did you use to extend the platform? For example, if I kind of fork, let's say N8N, and I make a change in, a very core file, that maybe powers the workflow. And as N8N makes improvements, etc., that file might change. We'll see merge conflicts when we pull from upstream again. So it also depends as to how you did it. And an example of this, we actually did it. So AppSmith is written on top of the Spring Java framework. And there were a couple of things that we wanted that was slightly different from what the Spring framework offered. And the way we kind of did this was we added wrappers around the core Spring framework so that even as Spring keeps updating and we keep updating our libraries, the wrapper itself takes care of the customization that we want on top of that particular interface or that class file, whatever. And so how you extend also matters in order for you to keep your customizations valid, because I know for a fact that AppSmith and N8N and Baserow are very fast-moving projects. So there are multiple commits coming in each day. There are releases happening each week. So if you don't structure it properly, you're in for trouble.
Got it. So I switched the topic to limitation and drawbacks because this is actually both like obviously an advantage of open source, right? You're able to extend it yourself, but the drawback is like, if I hear you correctly, it's like you need your team to basically keep up in a way with the evolution of the core product if you want both to be able to benefit from or use the evolution of the product, or make sure what you've done is still going to work with these evolutions. So you need to. It's like it's not. I think it's a solution that you really need to think through, I guess, before starting to kind of deviate from the original product. Is that the like? Do your clients, for instance, contact you about this? Like, we intend to maybe build our own kind of version of this or this feature. Do they contact you to know what's your new roadmap to see if they should do it or not, or do they ask you for advice on like what's the strategy once we deviate from your product? Do you have conversations like that with your customers?
Absolutely. That I would say maybe there's not a huge amount, but often there's ways. So I had one yesterday, for example, with somebody that wanted to modify some of our nodes and sort of add some functionality. And generally, the advice I've given in that case was that actually you don't need to fork the code base for this. Forking it creates sort of additional, dependencies, additional requirements that you then have to keep on top of. With the case of N8N, you could just create a custom node. And since I think maybe a month or two ago, we have a feature where you can just write your own node. You can publish it to the NPM repository if you'd like to, and you can just sort of search for that and import that node, without using any code in N8N. So there's also other ways, I think, in our products where you can add additional functionality without having to fork and manage all that side of things.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah. And so in a sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's one. We of course talk a lot about our customers to understand what they want to develop and to adapt it with our roadmap. As I told you, it's difficult to prioritize. But for example, because we are open source and the architecture of Baserow is very modular. Like if you have a very specific functionality, but Baserow don't offer it, you can actually create plugins for it. Like everything can be extended in Baserow. You need to write code for it for sure. So you need some Python and some JavaScript to do that. But it's a mix between if we can do it because it's not on our roadmap, you have the possibility because of the architecture to create plugin on your own if you have technical skills.
Got it. Yeah. So when people approach you, or like when you're trying to be totally, as unbiased as you can be about open source, what would you say, or what do you see your customers complaining about on this? Like, what are what would actually not make them choose an open source solution like you, and rather something that is it number of features that is like when they evaluating your solution compared to alternatives in the market, and some of them are obviously closed proprietary ones. So what is the decision factor for them that you observe? Is it like feature based, or is it the technical level required, or what's the still just as a reminder, we're still in a no code context, so we are still at a technical level that most should be able to to be comfortable with. But what do you see as drawbacks for people going with an open source solution like yours, or in general?
For AppSmith, in some of the most often what should I say questions that we hear is around, especially when it comes to AppSmith versus some of our closed source competitor products, is the fact that, oh, I have to self-host this, so which requires a certain amount of skill set. Well, that means you need to have access to EC2 machines, being able to self-host it, be able to decide what scale you want your machine on, and size your machine appropriately, etc. So that is a very common thing that we hear, and so that's a big sort of I think a hindrance to anybody who's coming into or trying to use an open source product with very limited developer background. So which is also why I think open source low code or no code products work really well with users who have a certain amount of developer background. You may not be a hardcore developer today, but you have been one at some point in the past, so it doesn't phase people out. I think that's a very big sort of hindrance. The other is is a lot of at least for AppSmith, we are still a very young product. We are about 3 years old, while our closest competitors, they are 6, 7 years plus. So as a product, and Jason sometime back talked about OutSystems. OutSystems is a 15, 20-year-old product. So the other big hindrance for users is a young, and it's not particularly about being open source, but it's about the question about using a young upcoming product as compared to a much more mature, decade-old piece of software, proprietary or not. And that's when it starts to become the features that, let's say, AppSmith offers. Are these all the features that we are happy with or we need today, or do we need something a lot more enterprisey, if you will, like OutSystems, which will be able to support a lot of other edge cases, use cases that maybe AppSmith does not support today. And it's just a matter of time for us to to get to that point.
Got it. Yeah. But it's more related to like how many years you've been in business than the actual fact of being open source in that case. Got it. Yeah. Any other limitations you'd see, or?
As Arpit say, there is people who don't have like the technical skills to go into open source maybe, but this is why I think and how I think the connection between no code and open source is relevant, because let's talk first about what do you do if you identify that you need a new tool to address your challenges. So first you define your need and your resources. So resources are about skills. Do you have technical skills or not? Your time, do you have time to develop this product? Your budget, how much it will cost you? And finally, the human resources. Do you have teams who are available to work on your project? And this is exactly on the first stage where no code comes into its own. In situation where you lack resources, it will allow you to create tools without technical knowledge in a short time with a small budget and without always asking IT teams. So, for example, in the case of Baserow, for many years, SQL has been used to write and query data in relational database. One of the reasons when many people avoid using database and resort to spreadsheet instead is the lack of SQL scripting. So this is where Baserow and the no-code aspect come in with its easy-to-use platform, which allows people without SQL skills to create, share, and collaborate on relational database throughout an intuitive spreadsheet-like interface. So, but no-code have his limits. Like you are limited to the functionality offered by the no-code platforms they are using. Building an app on no-code platform make you dependent on the third-party technology provider. So factors like price, service quality, and security are beyond your control. And the pitch that I told to people is like, if you want open source because you have the skills and you want to self-host it, okay, it's interesting. But if you don't know how to use the open source aspects, the no code is your beginning. Then after you can use, if you want to scale your product, maybe now you don't use like external help to like develop plugins or something like that. But if anytime you need to do it, you are free to do it because of the open source. So it's not a lock in. It's really interesting, even if you don't have, I think, the technical skills to start with the open source aspect.
It's interesting that the scaling topic only comes up at this point, but what I observe from my standpoint is like sometimes we have limitations from tools. I'm talking about proprietary tools that have like certain capacity, like in terms of like an example that everyone can easily understand is like number of rows you can have in your database, right? That's an easy one, and not to mention them, but like for instance, Airtable, there's a limit that you can hit very quickly. But it depends on your plan, obviously. But even if you like take the like a enterprise plan, there's like 100,000. I think maybe they increased recently the limit, but it's still like fairly low, right? In many use cases, actually, it can be a blocker, right, to use the solution. I think Baserow specifically, you also have this kind of solution of limitation in the I would say the SaaS offering, and you're saying like, yeah, open source allows us to offer you to host yourself, and you can just get rid of that scale limitation, and so. I'm surprised you didn't mention it before, and is there a reason for this not to come up before, like the scaling topic? Because for us as an agency, this is one of the I think the reason why we would look at open source as well. It's to unlock the scaling potential of otherwise solution. Even within your product, actually, we can observe this. Like if we use your SaaS, offering, we have some limitation. If we move on to our own infrastructure, we can like not get rid of, but like work towards like overcoming these limitations.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, the limitation on the SaaS side to 100,000 rows is not a technical limitation, but more a commercial limitation.
Okay.
Yeah. So
no,
and it's interesting what you are saying, because this is exactly the use case which is relevant for no code and open source, because you can start easily even if you don't have technical skills with the no code aspect, like start on SaaS, for example, just to create your POC very easily and very fastly. And then when you identify that you have some limitation or you want to create a specific features on Baserow, for example, then you can move easily on the self-hosted solution. So it can, as you said, open to you more perspective to develop the tools and make it like very specific to your use case.
Got it.
And then
yeah, Arpit and Viraj, is it something you also see that people for like the scaling aspect of things, that people are moving to a self-hosted like configuration, or is it not really relevant in your case?
In our case, the scaling is not as prevalent as data compliance and data
Because you're more
residency
on
is.
that front end side.
Yeah, because we are very much on the front end side. So the reason that people end up self-hosting AppSmith is because they don't want to punch holes in their database, in their firewalls, and expose that DB to the public internet or a third-party cloud to access. So in our case, like data compliance and residency practices are what drives users to self-host AppSmith as compared to just using us on the cloud.
It's keeping everything in the solution they use within the governance of their IT team, for instance. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
And I guess just to add from the automation and sort of workflow perspective on this, volume is absolutely one of the reasons for self-hosting. That said, I think our cloud platform actually has maybe far more generous tiers starting at 20 euros a month compared to maybe the closed source alternatives that you'd have in the automation space. But yeah, once you're self-hosting, then we don't set any limits on our self-hosted products. So really the limit is just the hardware and the machine that you're running it on. But I guess just to add a couple more reasons, especially with the kind of product N8N is, you have a lot of advantages when you can run it on your own machine. So things like handling local files, things like running shell commands you can do with N8N. This is the kind of thing that would probably, it's not available even on our cloud version, and certainly most closed source cloud products would struggle to offer this sort of thing. So if you really need this, then self-hosting is really your best bet.
Got it. Okay, so that's many different reasons for self-hosting. That's great. I think we touched a bit on this already, but I want to dig a bit deeper in the users of a no-code open source solutions. And first, obviously, it's like, who do you target for your products? We talked obviously about the non-technical, the more like let's say operation or business people, the one actually using the tools, and we talked about the technical people. So who is your product primarily built for in each of your cases? I guess different persona, but like, who's your main persona? Maybe Arpit.
Yeah, so AppSmith, AppSmith, like I said earlier, is geared towards developer users or people with some knowledge of development. And the reason that we targeted developers first was because we believe that building admin panels, dashboards, internal applications, etc., that touch critical data. So that it may be touching your user database, your order information, your payment information, etc. Requires you as a user, requires you to know what the data layout looks like. And if we want to manipulate the data, we want to pull data from 5 different APIs, show it on a single dashboard, etc. Like those sort of use cases. That means we need to have a certain amount of basic programming knowledge. So which is why for AppSmith, our first port of call is developers. So developers discover us, host us, build their first apps. And funnily, what happens or ends up happening is once the developer builds and launches their application, they literally leave. And the rest of the platform is then, for the longest of time, used by the business user. So our retentions and users who actually we see again and again and again are the business users. The developer might come back 3-4 months later and then build the next application. Because a lot of these applications are customer support dashboards, user KYC management systems, etc. So we do have 2 different personas that we target, but our first port of call that adopts us is developers and the developer community. But what keeps us afloat is business users.
All right, and just to understand that a bit more specifically, like your business users are still kind of making changes to the application itself, not just using it, right?
Not a lot, because making changes to
Okay.
the application means having some background or context about the application. So we do see at times business users changing, oh, let me change the position of a button, or let me change the color of the button. But oftentimes, I mean, very, very rarely do we ever see a business user come in and change the logic of the application itself. Because that requires them to know what the underlying principle or the underlying logic of the app itself was in the first place. So we don't really see them changing a lot, and that's one. The other is because of access control that AppSmith provides to users, developers more often than not are very wary of giving this change access to business users. So
Okay.
because they fear that, oh, if I let a business user come in and muck around with my application, I don't know what they'll end up doing. Maybe they'll end up storing, they'll screw up my database or my table, and then I'll be in trouble. So all of these fears run through a developer's mind, and so what we end up seeing is more often than not, developers don't even give that edit access to the application to their end business users. So at max, you have developers or product managers who are still trusted within the team to be able to make a change sanely.
Got it. But if this is nonetheless a low code, no code approach to building internal apps, so the idea is to like increase the output of developers, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So developers are able to build applications a lot faster. So things that, if I was using React admin or Django admin, I was doing it from scratch, something that would probably take me 2-3 weeks, now takes less than 10 minutes with AppSmith. So it definitely improves the productivity for developers to build applications or admin panels on top of AppSmith. Business users, uh, unfortunately, on the other hand, with AppSmith, do face a little bit of issues, but with Baserow, N8N, Google Sheets, Airtable, etc., all of these platforms helping productivity of business users as well. So one of the things that we've tried to do at AppSmith as well is make those integrations much better, much stronger, so that even for business users to come in and build their own application, where they may or may not want to talk to a developer to get something done. So if they know that their data is hosted on Baserow and they've dragged and dropped a few workflows on N8N, they can just wire everything up very quickly on AppSmith. So we've tried to leverage other products. Thank you to N8N and Baserow for helping, lift the boat for everybody. But what we've tried to do is just improve those integrations so that business users also find it easy. But core applications we still see is built, maintained by developers.
Got it. Yeah. What about you, Viraj and Robert? Is it the exact same angle or slightly different? What's your take on this? Viraj, maybe?
Sure. For us, yeah, I think part of that resonates. You probably have to have at least some level of technical ability to come in and start using N8N. I think there's also a difference in terms of sort of the natural adopters of N8N versus the kind of people that we're actively they're looking for, that'll sort of make the company sustainable, the sort of the business users who are kind of using N8N in mission critical scenarios. Yeah, in those cases, there's often an engineer who starts playing with it, realizes, wow, I can do like a lot more in a lot less time, thanks to the low code nature with the ability to write code as and when needed. So that really gets the engineers in. And then they'll probably show it to sort of like a semi-technical business user, someone who maybe can do quite a lot with Excel. So they have that basic logic, that they understand that, and that translates, pretty well actually into building workflows on N8N. So in that respect, I think it's quite similar. But then you also have these sort of community users who are often, using it. I mean, we have people using N8N for home automation, right? We're not going out there looking for these kind of users, but they just kind of make it work for them. And often what's really, I think the one thing, engineer or not, what's driving them is they have a pretty clear problem that they want to solve. Anything from like, I want to automate the lights in my house through to I want to build this funky, business application for, thousands of users. That need is quite clear, and they're tinkerers. They kind of want to play with things, experiment with things, and that gets them through that initial learning curve to the point where they're seeing a lot of value from N8N, and then showing that value to their colleagues, who then also kind of jump on the bandwagon. And similar to what Arpit said, I think maybe with N8N, it's not that the engineer goes away for a while, but once that workflow is created, the business user might come in and say, you know what, this message to Slack, actually, I'm going to change the wording of that. And because it's sort of quite visual and flowchart based, as compared to, let's say, a script with code comments, which only really a developer could edit, people find N8N a bit, they're kind of approachable in that sense, because they're like, yeah, I roughly see what it's doing. Maybe I'll get it wrong a few times, but then, third, fourth time, I'll find the way that I find the change I need to make this work.
Got it. So slightly different type of like user base for you, and I think it will be maybe even further more different for Baserow, right, Robert?
Yeah. Generally, we are used by transversal team, but what is funny is that it's a lot of times the IT teams who brings the solution to the business, because at the end they are working in a way for them. So what we notice is that generally our customers are SMB and large company. We work with various sectors like banking, manufacturing, tech company, government, and the common thread between those sectors is that they have sensitive data. But we notice, and this is one of their pain points, that they use tools like SharePoint, and it's not compliant, not collaborative, and you are on transversal topic. So if you have external clients or your team are across several countries, you want to use a more dynamic tool, a more compliant tool, without adding the fact that if you use a spreadsheet, you can integrate it with other tools to create automation. So yeah, we are using mostly by transversal team. We have like 3 different use case. It's mostly data management, automation and integration with other tool, and they use us also as a backend for applications.
Got it. Yeah. All right. Understood. So we can see like there's basically all the possibilities, right, from these no-code open source tools gets really towards the most technical people, something in between that is like being able to be used at different levels, basically either for, like you Viraj mentioned, the tinkerers, and the obviously most more technical advanced people, but like basically both can use and even maybe to some extent collaborate in these tools, and Baserow, where it's really actually once the solution is brought in, it's really empowering the business people. So that really basically can address all these personas. So I think you mentioned already who are your main user base, but Robert at the end concluded with a few interesting use cases. So I wanted to maybe this is what is going to be the most interesting for the audience. This is the easiest for people to project themselves into, oh, we could use this for this and that. So can you maybe each of you give us a few or one main, either your main use cases and maybe your most original use case that you've seen, that thing that would like that will be what will maybe help people better, kind of see where they could leverage your solutions. Maybe Robert, you were already touching on this. Maybe you want to follow up with this.
So we work with, I don't think I can tell their name, a big bank in Canada. They have more than 30,000 employees, and we work with the Treasury Department. So they are spread across 7 countries, and their pain point is that they have many different regulation in each one of this country. So they need to consolidate these rules with document. And the fact is that on Baserow, for example, you can add documents on your database. So it's interesting for them. and those regulations are always changing, and you have a lot of links to share, a lot of documentation, a lot of update to do. So they use Baserow because it's more dynamic for them to like collaborate in this platform, to share all the information and to consolidate this information. We have another use case.
Sorry, on this, Robert, do you know what they were using before? Were they like sending spreadsheet out, or was there a lot of emailing, or what did you replace basically?
We replace tools like Excel, like Google Sheets, and all the automation stuff by where they sending emails. They can create like automation stuff, collaborate directly on Baserow. But yeah, mainly we are replacing Excel, Google Sheet, so spreadsheet in general.
Got it. Yeah. And sorry, I cut you on the other example you were about to say.
Yeah. So the other example is quite different. So it's more about digital wallboard for industry. So in manufacture, you will have a digital wallboard. So they use Baserow as a backend for this digital wallboard, but also production leaders interact with the database to not only as a backend, but to configure, extract some of the data for further analysis. So they can link it via APIs to tools like Power BI to have more analytics on what happened in this manufacturer.
Okay.
And before they did it like manually.
All right. Yeah.
They didn't have like a backend to do it. They just have like the wallboard. So yeah.
Cool. Viraj, do you have like a typical use case? I think it's pretty large, but do you have like typical use cases and maybe like number of operations that goes with it or things like that?
Sure. So okay, quite broad, but I'll try and summarize. I think most N8N use cases in business, you're looking at things like ETL, so working with data, getting data in, modifying it, setting it somewhere else. That's pretty common. Rapid prototyping is a second, frequent use case. So often you kind of just want to build a proof of concept of something. You want to kind of look at where the data is flowing. You want to explain it with the kind of the visual kind of flow diagram that N8N has. That's also fairly common. And I guess the third thing is sort of what we're seeing a lot of, especially amongst engineers, is often Python or Bash scripts can be quite tedious to maintain, especially if they're connecting to different services. When the API changes, you've got to go in and update that. They're not very explainable. You can't just give it to like a non-tech colleague and say, hey, look, modify this script. So actually, a lot of engineers are migrating these scripts onto N8N because it's very explainable, very easy to follow. And then they kind of don't have the headache of like updating or worrying about, API updates. They can, it kind of really saves a lot of time for them. So those, I think, are the bread and butter use cases. I should also say we've got a very big growth community in France, especially. So a lot of growth engineers are using N8N to do things like lead enrichment, through things like, helping with their outbound campaigns, analyzing the results of experiments. So we're pretty grateful for those guys as well. But I guess that gives you kind of the kind of the everyday range of uses. And then I think I feel quite lucky to be in the product team because I get to speak with users who have like completely like blown my bounds of what I think was possible with N8N. And I think the one example I'd share on that is a NGO called World Central Kitchen, and they often are working in areas with no cell coverage. And they've equipped a lot of their volunteers with these Garmin GPS devices that work on satellite. And what they're using N8N for. So with that, along with the Telegram app, as and when they get signal, they can just in the field take some photos, have their GPS coordinates added, and the person using N8N there has essentially built like a live real-time map of where their volunteers are, what they're seeing, using N8N as the glue between quite a few different services. So
interesting.
That gives you some idea of the range of things that we're seeing people use N8N for.
Yeah, the one I was maybe not so conscious about is maybe the rapid prototyping, like as basically a step in the development process. I didn't maybe had this one in mind. That's interesting. Yeah. All right, and Arpit, do you have? So I think the use cases for you are a bit more focused, right, on the internal apps.
Yeah. So AppSmith is very geared or optimized for internal applications, but in terms of teams, use cases, etc., we are still like super broad. So we have about 10,000 odd teams globally using us for in various industries ranging from e-commerce, fintech, life sciences, manufacturing, dealerships, etc. So we have very broad sort of use cases. So we are not focused on a particular vertical. All that we kind of optimize for is that it's a use case that you would probably have internally within your team or within a closed group of people. And when it comes to the size of companies, we've seen like really small startups to very large enterprises end up adopting us. And a very common I would say application that gets built on top of AppSmith is, like I was saying earlier, a customer support dashboard where, let's say, your tickets are stored in Zendesk, your sales or order information is in Salesforce, your user information is in Postgres or DB, and for a customer support engineer, when you get a ticket that you need to resolve, you want to see all of this information on a single screen, and then update any of this information easily without having to go through multiple screens or multiple different applications. So being able to collate this information from different services and then being able to update all of them as well from a single screen, that is a very big sort of use case that we see, and that plays out in different shapes and forms. So like a fintech, for example, uses us for KYC management. So when a new user opens an account, they need to be verified, their documents need to be verified, and some human needs to click OK. So which means that they need to see the photo, the driver's license, the passport information, so on and so forth, and then verify it looks okay, and then update it via an API in their database. So that's a very common use case that we see. And extending to what Virat said, it's mind blowing, and I think that's a privilege of being a part of an open source community. It's mind blowing to see use cases that I would have never ever thought a product to be used and leveraged. For example, again, this is in France. An NGO uses AppSmith to help relocate refugees coming in. So it helps them organize them, give them jobs, connect employers to refugees with certain skill sets, and does all of that matching. And all of this happens on a portal that is built on top of AppSmith. We saw a very similar use case during the Russia-Ukraine war itself. When during that war, there was a whole disaster relief effort that was going on in Ukraine. A lot of applications, a lot of users in East Europe reached out to AppSmith in order to get us to help them to build these admin panels to help the recovery effort, the disaster recovery efforts. So just being able to see a lot of these use cases play out in the community, I think is a privilege to be part of.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine like when your solution is helped for such situations that like motivates you to get out of bed in the morning. That's for sure. All right, very clear. So it's like aggregating different sources of data and being able to act on them from a single screen. Very clear use case as well. I think we're gonna open to the questions from the audience. I know there were already quite a few. I'm gonna go back up, and I think we had an interesting one. So it's going back a bit to being more like focus on you, but is it? And I guess the overall question is like, does it affect your trajectory and strategy as a whole to be open source in terms of like funding and runway? I think Arpit, you touched on this about basically revenues are a bit further down the road when you decide to go the open source route. So do you think in terms of financing you have less options maybe, or is it the same when you're open source versus when you're not? Like, do you see different reactions from the VC community or the other financing sources that you may have? Like, how does it impact basically your financing discussions?
Right. So I very strongly believe that there is always money for good products and good companies, regardless of whether there is if there's a boom cycle or a bust cycle going on, or whatever happens. So there is always money for a good product and a good company. Having said that, there are definitely fewer investors, especially VCs or angel investors, who align with the open source ideology and who understand what it takes to succeed with this business model. So it's not about, oh, this business model is wrong, but it's just about finding those people who align with your own vision. And this is not very different from if you were raising money for Uber, which takes billions and billions and billions of dollars just to generate their first dollar of profit, right? And there are again a few investors who would align with that sort of business model or that vision. So every business model is unique, and all you just got to do is find these group of people who align with that. And trust me, there are a lot of people who do love and wish to propagate the open source ideology, that philosophy. And we've met a lot of such investors who were very, very happy to put in money into AppSmith.
Got it. Yeah, I think Robert, you mentioned you just like recently raised a round. So how did that go in that perspective? Like, do you have like information about how it went down, and like whether like open source was like either an enabler or a blocker for many venture companies?
Look, I was not in the discussion with VCs about it, but what I totally agree with Arpit, and this is why what I can tell you is that on Baserow we have bunch of seed investors also from the low code and the open source space, and it's really important because, as Arpit say, they understand that it's a great momentum and it's take time to build a freemium community, but also to go target enterprise. So yeah, it's important to have people VC and investor who understand the vision and the business model of open source. Definitely.
Understood. Yeah. And I just want to jump on the very last words you mentioned, because that's the question we had in our mind, is how specifically, and sorry from jumping from the business aspect to the all, but I just want the audience to get as many information out of you as they can today this morning. Regarding the enterprise segment specifically, like how do you approach how do you approach specifically this segment as an open source tool? Is it like easier to get in because you have like an easier, like you're basically a bit more welcomed by the IT team, or like what's your interaction specifically with these more enterprise type customers? Maybe Viraj, we haven't heard you on the discussion, so maybe we can start with you on this one.
Sure. So I think actually, quite fortunately, what I've experienced, more than us approaching them, it's them approaching us, because the barrier is so low to just trying an A10. We don't force you through a sales motion. There's no demo calls or anything for to sit through. It's as simple as an engineer or someone who's inquisitive at that company, either downloading our desktop app, or if they're a bit more, if they have a server set up, they can run it and host it themselves. And then we really hear about these people either when they post on the forum or when they email us, and that's when the discussion starts, and we start understanding how exactly are you guys using us? What's the entire team? And actually, sometimes you're going up to sort of 15, 20 users of N8N in that company until they come to us and say, look, now we kind of want to know, we're going to modify N8N. We want to know what's on your roadmap so that we're not doing the same thing that you're going to do in 2 months' time. So really, it's quite organic, actually, how that comes about. And I guess we've had companies like sort of Wix, CBS, come in through these sort of motions, where the first time we might hear about them is when they post on our community forum.
Actually, it's worth mentioning your free tools are all like self-service, so we don't have to ask for like a demo or like book a demo. It's not the CTA on your website, the main one at least. Cool. Anything on this? Maybe either Robert or Arpit on like how like your interactions with the enterprise customers is like usually either starts or is managed?
For us, it's very inbound, as what Viraj was saying, that people adopt AppSmith within their own personal use case or their teams, and they reach out to us eventually saying, oh, I'm now interested in the business edition, or I want to upgrade my plan, I want some features, etc. And we've been like using AppSmith for months on end. We are very happy with it, and we want to invest in your success. So this is a very sort of common interaction that we end up having. Obviously, at that point, we do also talk about, how is AppSmith, as Jason asked, how is AppSmith different from OutSystems and etc. Because at that point, when money starts to get involved, is when people actually start to put, their best foot forward. So they want to ensure that they're investing in the right platform, they're investing in the right direction. And they also reach out to us for a slightly longer term roadmap around what features we are kind of building out, what we have in the pipeline. But we don't invest in outbound sales or communication or etc. Like everything is very, very inbound for us.
Let me maybe slightly rephrase or the question, or maybe amplify it a bit, in the sense like, as if I were in the shoes of the enterprise customer, I would be, for instance, one of the things I would be curious about is like, how do you support your product for enterprise customers as an open source solution? Is it more community based than another enterprise tool, or is it about the same? What's your approach to this?
So in our case, it's very so we have a very clear distinctions, and so if you are an open source user, we have a very, very large Discord community, forums, etc., which where users are always happy to help each other out and answer. But if you're looking for dedicated support, you're looking for SLAs around support, around uptime, around etc., then that's when we kind of get those teams to move to a paid edition or a business edition of AppSmith, where our team can then help them and support them a lot better. And we can kind of dive in. We offer, on-prem sort of support as well, where we kind of literally SSH or we literally kind of remote login into those systems, help them build out those applications as well. Having said that, I think a large part of the success or adoption for AppSmith today has been because of the support that we've offered to our open source users as well. So our Discord community is very active, and a large part of that is also AppSmith developers and AppSmith support team who are, taking the mantle forward and not just leaving it to chance. It is very, I would say, dedicated and intentionally done in a way so that we can retain those users, and then when they actually upgrade to a proper SLA, then we actually meet those SLAs.
All right, yeah. So what I hear is basically, as an open source tool, you would then have like a better kind of first service support because it's community based and the community is large. And as an enterprise customer, you can have the same kind of support as you would have with other non-open source tools.
Yeah.
Is that like, to sum up? Is
yes.
that basically
yes,
the idea?
that's accurate.
Yeah. What is interesting in what Arpit said is one of the key indicators to measure the efficiency of an open source tool is the community. So the vision of free access is not just about money. It's actually about collaboration. At the end, if you have a free tool, but this tool is not powerful, is not efficient, or it doesn't evolve, no one cares it's free or not. So the free access become relevant if you have a dynamic community. Dynamic means that they are sharing their use case, they challenge the technical aspect of your tools, and they create plugin based on the source code to make evolve the product. So of course, you also need that the company collaborates with this community. So this is the support part, not as a company, but as a leader of this community. And this is how a virtuous circle is created, where free access will generate an investment of time by the user and an investment of time by the leaders, which will result in an interesting return on investment for both parties. So the tool will evolve much faster and will remain free to maintain this dynamic, which make open source very powerful. And for the paid feature, you have, of course, a big support, because you won't like to, and this is why enterprise are going to pay for specific features like role-based access control, SSO, and stuff like that. And for the support, for sure, like to be very reactive on the need of the business teams.
Got it. Yeah. No, I just wanted to make sure, it was a very candid question about is it more like, oh, all the support is done by the community, or no, you do have like teams in place for this kind of support requirements. Great. I think we have a question from Jason that is quite interesting. Let me dig it up. Yeah, it's this one. It's about like so your users developing applications, not necessarily the end users here, but like users actually using the tool to build automation and so on. The question is I think individual for each of you, is like, will you offer some sort of certification? Is it already something you're looking at, like because I think we are starting to see on job descriptions and even on resumes on both sides, like, oh, I'm proficient in this tool and this tool, and sometimes we can start seeing the mentions. Like I remember, maybe I've seen I think N8, and I've already seen it on a resume. We've seen it. We see these your names basically starting to pop up either on job description or resume. So will you be offering? Do you have a strategy on this? Will you be offering official certification, or at least the official courses? What do you intend to do for this? Maybe Jason. Sorry, and then Viraj.
Viraj. So, good. So in answer to Jason's question, we actually have some courses already. We've got level 1, level 2. They're free to take, completely free. A lot of people post them on LinkedIn, which is great to see as well. I'll just drop a link in the chat to where you could find out more information. And these courses will actually make you build a workflow in NA10, introduce you to some of the key concepts. So we have a start. I think there's a lot more we'd love to do on this. With anything like NA10, I think all our tools really, we want to make sure that our users are equipped and know as much about the tool as they can, so that they're building better products using these tools. So short answer, there's some we've made a start, and hopefully there'll be more to come in the future as well.
Yeah. I think we've seen like some non-open source in our space, in the no-code space. We've seen some tools investing a lot in the whatever they call it, can be a university or academy or whatever, and this has become like a great asset for them. So I think that's part of the question. What's the roadmap for you, Arpit? Do you plan to offer a certification? I think Viraj, you didn't mention anything specific about the certification, so it's not on the roadmap yet, I assume.
Oh no, so we have level 1 and level 2 courses already available.
But these deliver sort of certification with an exam at the end or something like this, or?
Yeah, actually, so you have to get a certain mark. So you have to build the workflow, and then you have to do a Q&A. And only if you get above a certain, I think it's 70 to 80%, you need to get right to then be actually awarded that course. And if I elaborate a bit more, so on our forum, you then have a badge that shows you've completed level 1 or level 2. So that's a nice way of showing that. And I think we are still, you can either put it on your LinkedIn. I think we generate like a course ID as well, so you can actually put that on your LinkedIn that you
nice.
that course, just to show potential clients or other employers or whoever it might be that you have some level of knowledge with NA10.
Good, cool. Yeah, sorry, back to you, Arpit.
Yeah. So I think we have a I just pasted on the chat as well. We have a few courses which are not, I wouldn't say they're official courses, like we had absolutely nothing to do with it. So we're very thankful for the community to come up and actually create their community powered courses. The one that, I think we've officially sort of done was with Free Code Camp. And so that's the only one. So right now, I think we are a little earlier in the life cycle for us to do official certification and courses. But this is definitely something that we are looking at, and hopefully in the next sort of 1 or 2 quarters, we will have a much better intentional answer to the certification and education aspect.
I think it will be also helpful for us as an agency when we try to, tap into a community. This is actually back to the community kind of aspect of things. This is one of the things we talked to a lot of no-code and low-code tools, and one of the questions we ask them is like, what's the size of your community? Where do they hang out? How can we reach out to them? And this is one of the key aspects for us. It's the same with a programming language, right? It's not limited to the no-code tools as well. And this is one of the aspects we look into. And once we've identified the community, if it's it has reached a critical mass, this is makes obviously the tool more interesting for us as an agency, or I would guess also as a regular customer. And then the difficult thing is like to assess the level of these developer in your community, and have these kind of certifications help already. Is already a first filter for this, and it helps a lot. So sometimes when tools don't have such things, we actually have to test the people ourselves. And it's not easy to be able to test people in many tools. Concluding with you, Robert, on Baserow, what do you have in terms of like certification and courses?
So we focus on user documentation, but we want to have like training partners develop courses, because for now we are focused predominantly on product development. I also share in the chat like tutorials to create automation and like documentation for developers to understand all the logic of Baserow.
Got it. Yeah. So the three of you have already either things like courses you've created or that your community created, or tutorials. And at the moment, N8 already has like 2 levels of certification that people can already take basically and put on LinkedIn. So that's great. Just want to conclude, and we should be right on time. Is there like maybe one or what are the takeaways you would want the audience to go home with? I want to give the opportunity to each of you to maybe say a few words about like to sum up the discussion we had this morning. Maybe we can start with Viraj, if you already have your takeaways in mind.
Sure. So I think
maybe you also like take from the conversation itself this morning, like from your counterparts. So yeah.
Yeah, I think in summary, first of all, thanks Lucien and Astrid for hosting the panel. It was really great to see, I think, the stage at which no-code and low-code source available and open source tools are at. I think there's a lot you can do. There's articles out there on how you can use N8N with AppSmith, with Baserow. So that there's a lot of content, and the kind of the groundwork actually is pretty much there. So I think for anyone in business who's thinking, okay, I get why self-hosted low-code tools make sense, I think you'll find that actually it's quite easy to now jump into, and it's becoming easier every single day as more features and more content is being written around this field. So I would say just jump in, and if you have a use case or a problem in mind, try it out. And we're all very approachable, I'm sure. The N8N community, certainly you'll get a reply within 4 or 5 hours if you have any kind of roadblocks or issues. So yeah, please give it a go.
All right, thank you. Maybe Robert, if you have.
Yeah, if I have the last word, is like stop like using spreadsheet when you need to use a database. No-code, make it like available for non-technical users, and the open source is gonna help you like to scale this project. So yeah, go on the community, sees a different use case. And this is what is really interesting in the open source aspect is that you have a huge community on our blog that are sharing use cases, and it's really interesting because it's open a lot of new way to work and to collaborate with different teams.
All right, thanks very much. And we'll conclude with Arpit.
Yeah, for me, extending to what Viraj and Robert said, I think the options for users to build, develop, deploy applications are a lot more, I would say, versatile than the original low code, which is Excel, which 30 years, 40 years old product, works great. But I think the options today are a lot more varied and a lot more powerful. So which gives a lot of power to users to self-host, to leverage. And personally for me, I think my personal takeaway from this is I think at AppSmith, we need to invest more in certification and training. Like that's my takeaway. We haven't done too well at that.
Thank you. Well, it seems that it's something that people ask for. So yeah, it would be great to have it. And also, we like I said, we personally would be interested to have these type of certifications from tools that enable us to being able to hire better. Also put ourselves better in front of customers. So it's also interesting for us. Great, thanks very much for accepting to talk this morning. It was a lot of insights. I think it's a lot to unpack for the people in the audience. I think we will be in touch in the future, and it was great. Maybe we can catch up in a year and see where you all are at, and see where the open source no-code movement at large is at. So thanks a lot again for the discussion this morning, and we'll be in touch. Thank you everyone in the audience as well.
Thank you to the audience.